I entered my nephew's room while he was sleeping. I couldn't control myself. The storm outside clawed at the mansion with furious winds, rattling the windows like an omen. Clara clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she stood outside Lucas's room, trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of emotions she had buried for years. She pressed her hand against the wooden door, her heart racing. "Turn around, Clara. Go back to your room." But her feet didn't move. Lucas wasn't just her late husband's nephew. He was a man who had become her shadow, her confidant, her savior. When her husband, Jacob, had passed in that sudden car crash 5 years ago, Lucas had abandoned his ambitions abroad to care for her. At first, his presence had been a balm, soothing the ache of her loneliness. But over time, his kindness, his quiet strength, and his laughter had ignited something dangerous inside her. She hadn't planned to walk into his room tonight, but the argument earlier that evening had pushed her over the edge. "You can't keep pretending this isn't real," Lucas had said after dinner, his voice low but insistent. "I see it in your eyes every time you look at me. And what about you?" Clara had snapped, masking her fear with anger. "You think I don't notice the way you've been following me, watching me? Do you know what people would say if they found out?" "Let them talk," he had retorted. "I don't care what they think. Do you?" She hadn't answered him then. She couldn't. Instead, she had stormed upstairs, locking herself in her room. But now, hours later, she found herself here, standing outside his door, unable to silence the pull toward him. Finally, she pushed the door open. Lucas lay on his bed, his chest rising and falling in the soft rhythm of sleep. Moonlight streamed through the half-drawn curtains, illuminating his face, so peaceful, so heartbreakingly beautiful. He wasn't the boy she'd once known. He was a man now, every inch of him. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides as she stepped closer, her breath shallow. "Why am I doing this?" she thought. Yet a part of her already knew. She had crossed the line long ago in her heart, even if she hadn't dared to act on it. As she stood over him, memories surged forward like a tidal wave, moments she had tried to forget. The night he had held her hand in the garden, telling her, "You deserve to smile again." The way he had wiped her tears after Jacob's memorial, whispering, "You're stronger than you think." The accidental brush of his lips against her temple during a late-night conversation, leaving her breathless for days. "Clara?" His voice broke the silence, groggy yet sharp with awareness. She gasped, startled, as his eyes fluttered open. He blinked at her, his brow furrowing. "What are you doing here?" he asked, sitting up. Her voice faltered. She had no excuse, no explanation. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered finally. He studied her for a moment, his gaze unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, closing the distance between them. "You came here for a reason," he said softly, his voice laced with something she couldn't quite name. Hope, desperation, love. "I shouldn't have," she replied, her voice trembling. "This is wrong, Lucas. Everything about this is wrong." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. "If it's so wrong, then why does it feel so right?" His touch sent a jolt through her, and she stepped back, shaking her head. "You don't understand. It's not just about us. Jacob's memory." "Jacob is gone," Lucas said, his tone firm but not unkind. "And if he were here, he'd want you to be happy. He wouldn't want you to punish yourself for loving again." Tears filled her eyes as she looked away. "But not like this. Not with you. People would say it's betrayal. That it's forbidden." Lucas interrupted. "Then let it be forbidden. Let them call it what they want. I'd rather spend my life in scandal than another day pretending I don't love you." Clara froze, her heart shattering under the weight of his words. "You don't mean that." "I do," he said fiercely. "And I think you feel the same, no matter how much you fight it." She opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat. She did feel the same. She had for years. And no amount of denial could erase that truth. But before she could respond, the door creaked open behind her. "Clara," a voice called, low and gravelly with suspicion. Clara spun around, her heart plummeting. It was Jacob's brother, Heinrich, Lucas's father. He stood in the doorway, his eyes narrowing as they flicked between her and Lucas. "What's going on here?" Heinrich demanded. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She couldn't sleep," Lucas interjected smoothly, stepping forward. "We were just talking." But Heinrich wasn't convinced. His gaze lingered on Clara, sharp and accusing. "At this hour? In his room." "It's not what it looks like," Clara said quickly, her voice trembling. Heinrich's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "It looks like you've been spending too much time together. People have started to notice, you know. The way you look at him. The way he looks at you." Clara's breath caught. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Heinrich stepped closer, his eyes boring into hers. "You might think you're being discreet, but everyone's talking. And if you don't stop whatever this is, it'll ruin both of you." Clara glanced at Lucas, whose jaw was tight with anger. "We're not doing anything wrong," Lucas said firmly. "Not yet," Heinrich replied coldly. "But if you care about her, Lucas, you'll leave before you destroy her reputation. Or her life." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Clara felt the walls closing in around her. She knew Heinrich was right. Whatever this was between her and Lucas, it would only end in ruin. "I'll go," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas turned to her, his eyes widening. "Clara, no. It's for the best," she interrupted, her heart breaking with every word. "I can't stay here, Lucas. Not like this." Before he could protest, she fled the room, tears streaming down her face. In the days that followed, Clara packed her things and left the mansion, cutting off all contact with Lucas. She told herself it was the right thing to do. That distance would heal them both. But late at night, as she lay awake in her empty bed, she couldn't stop thinking about him. And in his room, miles away, Lucas stared at the space where she had once stood, vowing that one day he would find her again, no matter the cost.